Hello, everyone! Here we are again in another session. Thank you, everyone. It's been a great day today. I know it's late in Europe, but it's gonna worth this presentation. It's closing the day, and I'm super glad to have uh, these folks right now because it's going to close a loop because in the morning we talked about AI, and then we checked so many plugins and how to test Mautic, and now we're gonna see how it's this thing, personalization at scale. And I'm glad to have here today Julie McAveeney. It's a product management director at Acquia and has acted as the product manager for Campaign Studio, Acquia's deployment of Mautic, as well as the multi-tenant platform Campaign Factory since Mautic Inc. was acquired by Acquia in May 2019. And also, along with her, Andy Towne is a senior customer value manager at Acquia and a member of the Mautic Council. He has been working with Mautic in various sales and customer success roles for just a week shy of 7 years, and currently guides Acquia customers with large complex implementations of Campaign Studio, and also works with Acquia's customer data platform to help organizations create great customer experience. Nice to have you both here. Let me put all of you on stage and let's rock and roll. You mute and okay, here you go.
Thanks, Rodrigo. Hi, Andy. Um,
Hello.
hi. Do you mind sharing your screen?
Yep. Um,
So as Andy's doing that, I guess, thank you again, Rodrigo, for introducing us. So again, my name is Julie McAveeney. This is Andy Towne. We are very excited today to present today's topic, which is content personalization at scale. And if you don't mind going to the next slide, and then the slide after that. So here's today's agenda. We have this broken into two main parts. The first is scaling personalization. So in this section, we'll walk through the different features in Mautic and how you can use these features to streamline and automate personalized messages to your contacts. Also in this section, we have Andy who will demo the features and he'll walk through a made up use case so that you can see the features in action. Next, we have personalization, distributed marketing. So for the second part, we'll talk about distributed marketing at a very high level, what it is, how you might benefit from it, and we'll also speak to some potential use cases. And then we'll close out with some Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask us at the end of this presentation. Next slide, please, Andy. So before jumping into those two sections, I did want to add a quick slide here to talk about why we're talking about what we're talking about today. So what you're seeing here is a survey from Deloitte Digital. This is from 2022. They surveyed hundreds of their consumers and businesses in the United States, and they found the following. They found that businesses that were well-versed in sending out personalized messages saw double the improvement in customer engagement. They saw increased customer loyalty by 50%. These businesses also grew revenue per customer by 50%, and they were nearly twice as likely to exceed their revenue goals. So now that you can see how important personalization is, let's jump into what you can actually do in Mautic. Okay, so again, the first section here is foundations, and we'll go through each of these four different sections. So we'll walk through these four steps. The first is pulling in, organizing your customer data, which includes behavioral and demographic data. The second is audiences, where we'll walk through the different segment types and how you can utilize points to further segment your audience. Third is content. Here we'll discuss various ways in which you can tailor your communication. And finally, we'll dive into activation. So you're using all the pieces that we talked about in steps 1, 2, and 3. And then we'll talk about how you can put that together to activate your messages. Okay, next slide, Andy. So again, we'll talk about customer data. Okay, so when we think about custom fields, we think about taking a step back and thinking about the different businesses. So each business has a different data point. Oh, I think we're jumping into the poll. Each business has a different data points that are relevant to its market. Mautic supports several standard fields that are generic to any businesses, but we also know that there are requirements for each business that are unique. So Mautic allows you to create custom fields. So by creating these custom fields, you can define the information that's important to you and your business and be able to leverage that data to personalize messaging, segment contacts, and run reports that can indicate which types of contacts are worth spending the most time and money on. So within custom fields, you have the label. So this indicates the name for the custom field that appears in the user interface. You have the alias. This is the name that is needed in order to name the field in the database. So you can use this for API calls, tokens and emails, and other technical references to the custom field. You also have group. So this indicates the category, which includes the custom field. So you can view the field under the display group for company or contact records. And finally, you have data type. So this indicates the data type that Mautic leverages to validate the data that's in this field. And once you save the new custom field, you cannot update that field in the future. So that's just an overview of custom fields. Next, we'll jump into custom objects. So custom objects, again, taking a step back from contact information to companies, custom objects store all that important information. So with custom objects, you as a user can create many-to-many relational data tables to associate more items such as products, orders, and transactions, households, and more with either a single contact or multiple contacts. So example here would be, I'll use a very familiar company, McDonald's. So McDonald's wants to target certain customers based on what they ordered. So a custom object might be orders. And then within that custom object, you have the date of the order, the time of the order, the amount spent on the order, as well as the actual items. Let's say I ordered a Coke, a Happy Meal, and an apple pie. So all of that information will go in custom objects, and marketers can then segment based off of that information. So for example, they may want to target customers who bought a Happy Meal in the last 6 months with a new Happy Meal promotion. So that's an example how someone might potentially use custom objects to segment. And next slide. So next, now that we have that data, how do you actually create the audiences? So let's jump right into that. Okay, so points. Here I'll talk about lead scoring. So lead scoring is a way for marketers to measure which of their contacts are the most engaged based on their interactions and behaviors. So a contact with a higher score indicates a greater likelihood to reach your goal for that particular contact. So with points, these are some things that you should think about. So we have steps 1, 2, 3, 4. You should think about, how do your contacts interact with your brand? Who you're trying to reach? What pieces of content are the most valuable? What do you want to do with the contacts who reach a certain threshold? So points, you can choose to add points if a contact opens an email, submits a form, visits a landing page, and so on. And from there, you can trigger an action once a contact reaches a certain threshold, and that's a threshold that you set. Okay, so now in points, let's dive into static segments. So we'll talk about static and dynamic segments. Here we have static segments. Static segments are not based on a filter that you create in Mautic. So you can see some examples on the right-hand side. This includes point triggers, so points we just talked about in the last slide. One common use case that I often see is a CSV upload. So you may have a list of customers that you know you want to target, and you have that list, so you upload that within Mautic. So that then becomes a static segment. And then next, we have dynamic segment. So the difference between a dynamic segment and a static segment is that a dynamic segment is based off of filters that you apply within the segmentation feature set. So Mautic moves contacts into and out of dynamic segments based off the filters applied to that segment. So as the data associate with the contact updates, including company associations or behaviors. Campaign Studio updates segment membership. So this also applies to campaigns. If a segment no longer meets the criteria for that dynamic segment, they are removed from the campaign. Conversely, if the contact meets the criteria for a specific segment and it's in a campaign, they will automatically be added to that campaign. So again, difference between static and dynamic is dynamic changes based off of the filters. Static does not. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I'll hand over to you, Andy.
Thanks. So now we have a bit of a foundation for what is the data that you can personalize on, and think about how you can collect that data and get it into your Mautic instance, and then how you use it for segmentation. We'll talk about how you use that in your content. So your audiences are generally used and filtered with those dynamic segments based on the data that you bring in. But then you also want to personalize the content, whether it's through things like dynamic content in your emails or on your web page, or through different campaigns, which we'll also talk about in activation. So when we think about the content, we have a couple of things that will not only help with personalizing messages to your individual contacts, but especially if you're thinking about doing personalization at scale, and maybe you have multiple tenants, or just want to make your multiple instances, and want to make your instance a little bit easier to operate, especially if you have updates to content semi-frequently. So we have a feature called global tokens, and those are really just small snippets of text in many cases. We'll see those in the demo that we'll show in a little bit, but you can get more advanced and have full HTML content blocks that you have that are just reusable tokens to add into your emails and landing pages, or even text messages, but text would have less HTML, more focus on the text. You would create and use those snippets consistently to create a universal experience across all the messages that you have in the Mautic kind of owned, quote unquote, communications that you have for your customers. So not on your social ads, but your emails and your landing pages, and even in like dynamic content on your website. So it allows you to update content really easily. And we'll see a couple of examples of that, which when we think about greater ROI, that's really in your team efficiency. We've had customers before that wanted to update even something as simple as a copyright year. But if they have 100 emails that they have to go and update, that takes somebody a lot more time to go and update in every email and every landing page than just a one place that they would update that data in a Mautic instance. So thinking more about personalizing your content to your audience, the ways that you typically would do that are in your email builder with dynamic content, or dynamic content on your website or on landing pages. Another way that people think about dynamic content, especially in my experience as they're newer to Mautic or Campaign Studio, is simply contact tokens. So if you want to say hello first name in an email, or if you have a piece of data that you're saving to a contact record, you just want to drop that in as a little snippet that is personalized to that person, which is still a form of dynamic content. It's not quite as advanced as what we can do with the email builder or dynamic web content on your web and landing pages, but it is still a way to personalize dynamically when you're sending emails, text messages, or viewing landing pages. There's a few other things that are commonly overlooked in Mautic, and that's personalizing based on time zones, based on languages, and based on channels. So we'll see this again a bit in a demo, but just want to make sure that everybody is aware of these personalization capabilities. Time zones, when you think about your campaign events, you may schedule an email to send out at 9 o'clock in the morning because you think that's a time that people are commonly going to be opening their emails. Maybe it's 8 o'clock. But you might have customers that are in a different time zone than you. So if your time zone for your Mautic instance is set to be Eastern time, because that's where you are, but you have customers in California or on the West Coast, that specific time, they would receive that email at 9 o'clock in the morning. If you have a tracked time zone in the preferred time zone field for a customer record, they'll receive that email in a campaign event at 9 o'clock their time rather than 9 o'clock your time. Similarly, languages, we have a preferred locale field in Mautic contact records. And if somebody has that set to, say, Spanish, you can create a translation of either an email or a landing page, and somebody would see that landing page or read that email in their native language. Both of those fields you can actually very easily collect from a records browser. So if you're able to identify them, say from a link click or from a form submission, you can get their browser setting for their time zone and their language, and collect that and personalize the way that you're sending communication to them, both when and what language. Another capability that often goes overlooked is actually called the marketing messages feature in Mautic. And that allows you to personalize channels. So some people may prefer to receive content on text message. Some people might prefer to receive it as a push notification, depending on the type of content it is or type of organization and messaging that you're sending out. And if you have a mobile app. And of course, email. A lot of people may just prefer to receive marketing messages on email. So on the preference center in Mautic, a person could select their preferred channel. You would have to add that block to your preference center and enable people to access that preference center. But if they do select, say, SMS instead of email, you then could use the marketing messages feature to send that person an SMS, but at the same time, send somebody else an email with the same content. And I'll show that in the demo, but these are three that customers I work with really don't think about all that often, but would be really valuable if they used it a lot more. Another thing that is really helpful for personalization at scale, and even just for really instance management and making things easier for you to use, within Campaign Studio, we have this concept of saved rows. So you're able to create, say, an email footer or structures of different blocks in an email. Say you have colors and spacing. You don't want to rebuild those every single time you're creating an email. You can, of course, create templates, but different row structures you can just bring in, add, remove as needed, and not have to reset all those settings every time. The way that this really ties into personalization at scale is you can add things like dynamic content or tokens into those saved rows so that they're easy to just drop into a new email or landing page. And again, you don't really have to think so much about that personalization. It's just ready to go for the next person that builds an email. So finally, we'll talk about activation, at least in the foundations section of this presentation. So we have, again, the email builder, we have landing pages, and then we have campaigns. How are you getting the message out to your customers or your prospects or anybody that you might be sending content to? When we think about campaigns, we do have visual builders. One of the differences that I will acknowledge here, the email and landing page builders in the open source version of Mautic are different than what you'll see in the demo here for Campaign Studio, which is Acquia's version. But the concept of it is the same. Visual builder, you're building the content. You have the ability to use contact tokens. You have the ability to use dynamic content. You can send emails. You can send text messages, mobile push notifications. That's all still there. And you can also build campaigns or journeys that happen either in real time or based on schedules that you set. So now we will go into the demo. I will start. I have a very basic demo scenario set up here. So this is a version of Mautic called Acquia Campaign Studio. There's not excuse me, not a whole lot in here right now, but I'll start with the custom fields. So Julie mentioned earlier, when you think about custom fields, you want to think about the data types. Now, the scenario that I'm going to use here for the demo is college admissions. One of our largest customers actually does this at scale. They have hundreds of instances representing different colleges, and they send admissions campaigns, nurtures to students, maybe that are first-year students in high school. So that's a 4-year lead up until somebody might make a decision to apply and then enroll at that college. So when we think about data types, there's just a very few sample custom fields that I have in this instance, but we have like the intended area of study. If we know that about a high school student, we can really target what kind of messaging we send or what emails specifically about events on campus. If there are students that are high value, whether it's they meet certain demographic criteria that school is looking for, or just really smart, whatever criteria that school is looking for admissions, you can target messaging to people who are interested in that and try to get them to enroll. Other content that might not be used for like segmentation or different like dynamic content with filters would be like your admissions officer. So it's a really more personal point of contact for a student or a parent. And we also have record type here because your marketing to those types of people might be different. The student cares more about the experience that they would have when they're at college. The parent probably cares a little bit more about safety, about finances, about the type of education their student will get. So the messaging will be different depending on which audience you're sending to. That will lead to different segments and then different campaigns. A couple other admissions officer fields that are just on the contact record. So we're going to use a URL here to pull that in, and you'll see why in just a minute. So a few of those custom fields that we have, and then we use those to create segments. Now, I've only built a couple of dynamic segments here. Static segments, there's not a whole lot to. You can just create a new segment, upload a list, or add context to it. So here I have one segment for all parents and one segment for class of 2025 students. I have two contacts in here, one in each segment, and we can see the filters, say, for the 2025 students. So I have graduation year. One contact here I have set as a senior, so they'll receive a lot more targeted content for senior year, getting ready their last year of high school before they would go to university. And we know that they are a student. So if the contact data ever changed, say graduation year updated, we found out maybe the person skipped their last year of high school and they really graduated in 2024, or they stayed back a year, they're going to graduate in 2026. That person would no longer get the campaigns targeted for this year's senior class. Looking forward to May or June of next year when those graduations will happen. Similarly, on the parents, I have a very simple filter here. It's just the record type equals parent, and we can have a campaign using this segment that is very focused on parent content. So next I'll go into the emails and how I've used that personalization in the different data that I showed in the custom fields. So let's start here with the admissions. This is an email that would go to a student. And actually, while that loads, I can go over to my contact record here. This is one of the two records that I have in this instance. And we can open up the details. We can see my admissions officer name, might be a familiar name to most of you. And my intended area of study is engineering. So now let's look at the email and see how that information is used. A lot of lorem ipsum here, a pretty basic email. Now, this image right here, that doesn't look like Ruth. That's Dries Bytart. That's really just a sample image that we have as a placeholder. We have this dynamic image functionality, and that's why I have the image field as a URL. So this is just an example of why it's really important to think about the data types and how you're going to use the data when you put it into your Mautic instance. So I have this contact field token for the admissions officer photo. I also use right here dynamic content, where I just dragged in our dynamic content block. I only added one variation here for any students whose intended area of study is engineering. So instead of seeing our default lorem ipsum here, when I see the email, I would actually see this invitation to come to an open house at the Engineering Center at Northeastern University in Boston, which is where I went. So the last thing that we'll look at, and just to show how this works, we'll, at least on this email, we'll go to a preview. So here we can see that there should be a placeholder, and we see the tokens here. Not a whole lot of information. That's just the default. We don't know who the contact should be that we're showing any information for. So I will select myself. And now we can see Ruth is my assigned admissions officer. So if I, as a student, wanted to reach out to Ruth and get to know more about the admissions process or what my chances are about getting into that college or university were, I'd have that personal point of contact. So we have that contact preview, and you can just see how those tokens in that dynamic content works. Next, we'll take a look at the other email that I have here. And the big thing to show on this one, we can look at the email as well, but the difference here is really in the languages. So I do have this email. We see email ID 1 at the end. This is all in English. I have the same block here. This is the saved row that I was talking about. If I wanted to add that row again, I can just go to rows, content, and then because the rows are different structures, it is two different types of row. But here we go. I can just drop that into any part of the email, or I can delete it. I also have that saved row here in the bottom, in the footer of the email. This is those global tokens that I was talking about, where we'll get to this more at scale in just a minute. But when you think about that large customer I mentioned before, they have hundreds of instances that they do marketing for different colleges and universities. When they're creating their templates for campaigns and emails, they don't want to have to go into every single email and write the name and the address and all the other contact information for each one of those colleges and universities. So the global tokens, what that enables them to do is, in the instance configuration, global tokens, they can just come and, let's say, institution name. They would just update Acquia Academy to whatever the college or university's name is, along with all of the other data here that we have set as global tokens. Copyright year is another one, very common. Just come in here, replace that on January 1st in one place instead of hundreds. So again, on the email, we've got the global tokens, we've got the saved row, and we also have, I guess on this one, I don't have dynamic content. But the translations feature is what I wanted to show here. When you go to the email details page, you can see on translations, we have this Spanish version. So if I go to edit the Spanish version, I have set everything so that the subject line is in Spanish, the pre-header text is in Spanish, the language is set to be Spanish, and I set it to be a translation of that parent English version. So when I actually send this email, we'll go to Julie's contact record. And on the preferred locale field is set to Spanish. So when Julie receives that email, whether it's a segment email or a template email sent through a campaign, a form action, a point action, or directly from the contact profile, she would receive the Spanish version. So let's just go to the campaigns that I have set up. I'll go to the financial planning for parents one first. And I apparently did not finish setting up the email here. So let me do that. Email to send, financial planning for parents. I'm going to select the English version here. So even though we know that it's for parents, and Julie is the record that is set to be a parent, and she is set to receive content in Spanish, I'm going to set that selecting the English version. I'm going to go ahead and just publish this right away. So I should get the email in just a minute. While that takes just a second to process, let's go take a look at the other campaign. For this one, I have a nurture that I would receive that'll have all the dynamic content. It'll show that Ruth is my admissions advisor. That's a basic email. The next thing is that marketing message, where in this case, I just created some content that is meant to be a nurture, keep my university top of mind for this student. So it's hey, classes are started, good luck. What I have done is select a marketing message, and the marketing messages feature in Mautic. We have here, you can select email content and text message content. So my contact profile, I went to my preferences and I said, I prefer to receive that as a text message. Most of the marketing messages I would get here, if it's available as an email and it's a text message, I'll receive it as a text, but somebody else could receive that nurture kind of, hey, classes are started, good luck kind of content by email. So now that we've looked at all we haven't actually talked about the time zones, but the content, dynamic content, tokens, global tokens, saved rows, everything like that. Let's just go look at the email. If it did send. It did not. So the joys of doing live demos. Let's just see. It did send. And it should come. Let me just make sure that I searched correctly. All right. I don't know why I didn't receive that email. Anyways, the goal was I was going to show that it sent me the Spanish version. That's really all I wanted to show on the actual email. And then I just want to real quick show the at scale part of that. So in Campaign Factory, which is a related product to Campaign Studio, it's instance management. We have the ability to create templates. So in this case, I created this Mautic Conference demo template. I can see what campaigns are created in this template instance, what emails, if there were forms or any of the rest of this, I'd be able to see what is in that template. But then when I go to create a new instance, I would be able to select where I want that instance to be. And I could say, give me that template so that I don't have to go rebuild every single campaign every time. All the content will be there. I just need to update the contact data, update the global tokens, whatever I might use, and it's largely ready to go. Might do some other copy editing specifically for our college, but there could be use cases for like individual franchises of, say, fitness centers or restaurants that the copy doesn't really need to change. It's just set it and forget it pretty much with any new customer data that comes in. So again, thinking about that at scale, I won't go through all the details of how that works, but do want to talk about that a little bit. And Julie will actually go back and talk more about distributed marketing, which is where this the templates and instance management and using all of the personalization that I just showed comes into play. So go back here.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So as Andy mentioned, he showed a little bit about Campaign Factory. So I want to dive into distributed marketing with campaigns and what exactly that means. So if you go to next slide, um, what exactly is distributed marketing? So distributed marketing is a concept where brands sell their products or their services through different locations, channel partners, dealers, distributors, retailers, and agents. So think of it as a, hub and spoke model. So you have the corporate level, and then beneath that, you have multiple location levels, and the corporate level really needs to scale very quickly and efficiently. So this is how an organization makes digital experiences consistent. They're able to market across diverse channels. They can automate what would otherwise be essentially busy work and scales marketing efforts so that you're not using full-time employees to do what you could potentially do with distributed marketing. So this is useful across multiple industries from retail to banking, media, food and beverage. And it works to keep brand representation really tight across digital channels, locations, and partners. Go next slide, Andy. So who exactly needs distributed marketing? So I mentioned a few examples before, but to reiterate here, it's essentially any organization that focuses on multiple geographic locations and they need to use distributed marketing. So it could be a digital or marketing agency that needs to replicate across their different instances. It could be franchises. For example, in a few slides prior, I had talked about McDonald's. They may potentially want each of their locations to be an instance, and they want each of their instances to send out personalized messages that's very, very specific to that particular location. Or it could be a parent subsidy brand. So think about L'Oreal. They have multiple brands, and they want to make sure each brand is consistently sharing the same L'Oreal marketing message. You go to the next slide. I know we're running a little bit behind on time, so I'll just quickly go over this. So the benefits of this is governance and efficiency. So basically, organizations can maintain control over everything at the operational level, from workflows, editorial procedures, being able to review, being able to update. You have brand management and consistency. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Legal and regulatory compliance. So this is also very important for certain industries such as healthcare, finance, insurance, where they really, really have to have tight control on what's going out. And then you have analytics and automation. So Annie had mentioned one of our customers who has hundreds of instances. So how do you analyze all of those instances without going to each and every single one of them one by one? So you have one single area where you can analyze all those instances from one place. And then finally, it's overall a better customer experience because you have that control from the very top. You're taking the best practices and you're deploying those best practices to all the local locations. So those are some of the benefits of distributed marketing. And then I guess we can end here. I know we have about 6 minutes left. I do want to leave time for some Q&A. So any questions?
There were a couple questions and comments in the chat. I saw Rodrigo customize whether you use soccer or football, and that actually is a great use case for dynamic content. If people are in different countries, you could have different terminology for different things you might be talking about in your content.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I thought in a good topic that we could share during your presentation. It's amazing how you mentioned so many powerful capabilities that Mautic has, and sometimes, like you said, we overlooked because it seems like we take for granted, but we are not doing anything like that. Many companies, they aren't even customizing language, they aren't customizing channels, so we have so much like homework in order to get in a high level like you share it. So it's amazing.
And Dirk made a good point about the translations. There are a few things that could use a little bit more enhancement and capability for translations, like translating forms and a few other things within Mautic. But generally, like emails and landing pages especially, really strong feature that we're just starting to see more adoption of, and customers are really happy about the capability to do that. They just didn't know that it was possible, but they've been really excited since they've decided that that was really an important personalization for them.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And how, because like this example that we were talking about, soccer and football, how, where, because we have to have more data, to know our audience better. And when we don't have data, how can we get more of this kind of data? Do you have any suggestion?
There are things like soccer or football that, as a marketer, you can just determine, what is the content? How do we want to change that content based on the audience? So, if somebody is, say, in Europe or really anywhere except for the United States, you would call it football. So, if you are talking about what we call soccer, that would be dynamic content. So, you don't really need a whole lot of data for that, just your own marketing sense and what is the message that you want to send. For other things like your dynamic content or tokens, you would want to have that data, which you can use any. There's several different ways that you can get data into Mautic. APIs, CSV imports, plugins, connections to CRMs and CDPs. I know there's a session earlier today about CDP-driven messaging. Now, of course, you still have to get the data into any of those other systems and make it available as to your organization. Forms are really helpful for that, doing things like Julie talked about points earlier, finding people who are really engaged. That might be a different way to personalize your messaging and the campaigns that you're sending out to people. Points can even be like a very loose way to target people who are more active and help with email deliverability. So even that is a form of personalization that people don't really think of, is hit the people that are most engaged the most frequently.
Yeah.
Help your deliverability. Get them opening and clicking rather than having low engagement rates.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I like to keep this analogy with football live, because some friends, they love to spend almost their entire lives following soccer players, and they watch games, and I just like to see the goals after the match. I'm not into this kind of fanatic. Then you can organize your contacts if they are fanatics, so you are sending everyday content. If they are not, you can, instead of sending the same frequency to all your database. Nice. Oh, we have another question here from Kinsey. Would it be possible to add dynamic content in global tokens, for example with Twig, so you would be able to get the copyright updated automatically each year? Does that
That
make
one, I think, that's one of the differences between Mautic and Campaign Studio. The global tokens feature, I don't think is available, at least right now, in Mautic. But also in Mautic, you do have more capability to use Twig and Twig templates. So you would be able to use that example more automatically. At least I believe so. Perhaps somebody who does use Mautic and controls the code can answer that one a little bit better. But I believe the answer is yes, you could use Twig for something like that to make your operations a little bit easier.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, it's amazing to see all the possibilities that we have ahead of us as soon as we decided just, understanding how Mautic works. So it's amazing. So yeah, I don't know if we have any other question. It seems we are done. And also we are close because we have our closing session in the other room. So I want to say thank you for Andy and Julie. Thank you very much for bringing and such a great content. Of course, I have many questions about distributed marketing, but we will have to leave those questions for another opportunity. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andy and Julie.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
See you, everyone. We're gonna meet in the other room right now. Okay. See you soon.
Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye bye.